Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Church Security Answer Man. Today is part 2 of our use of force discussion. We're talking about your responsibilities and your liabilities. Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Church Security Answer Man, part 2 of dealing with use of force issues and me giving you my opinions. And don't forget that that's what this is. I'm strictly giving you my opinions as a former law enforcement officer, a member of church security, a security director, all of those kind of things, a person who studies this and tries to share information. I want you to have some great content. I want to give you the best information that I can possibly give you. So that's why we're talking about this topic, because there's not a lot of opportunities out there to talk about use of force continuum, escalating our use of force, those kind of things. And so I want to have that discussion with you, and we're continuing that today. So make sure you go back and find that first one, whatever platform you're listening, whether it's on audio or video, or go to our website at churchsecurityanswerman.com and make sure you catch the first part of this use of force discussion. So we're continuing. Last session, we talked about you and your threat assessment and limiting your liabilities, all of those kind of things. And now we're moving up that ladder, that continuum, whatever you want to call it. And now we're going to talk about getting help. So before we've looked at minimizing, trying to avoid those kind of things, now we're at the point of getting help. And I want to talk to you about arranging that ahead of time. You know, you need assistance at times. Whether you're a one-person security team, male or female, you need some assistance. So who is that? Is that an usher, or is it a church leader, ministry leader, or a friend or a spouse, or I don't know what that looks like, but who else can you call upon with a quick wave to come and help you if you need some assistance? And I hope maybe you have an opportunity to have a couple of people that are assisting you, that you can talk ahead of time and prearrange that. Even if they don't want to be on the security team, that's okay. But just that you have a second set of eyes and a second set of hands if you need those kind of things. So once you have, so we're up to the point where we've done our threat assessment, those kind of things, and now we're looking at this is an issue. This is a problem. So you've determined that this is a legitimate problem or a legitimate threat. And so now you're looking to call a team member, get a hold of a team member, call them over, wave them over, go over and talk to them and say, hey, can you go with me? Whatever that looks like. Or what's our other option? And don't forget, I'm a big fan of call the police first. Do we need to go out in the parking lot and talk to this person? Or can we? It's the middle of the service. Nobody's coming in or out of the building, and they won't be for a half hour, 45 minutes. So can I just call the police? And so, but if not, then calling the police. Now at this point, now we're in the middle of this situation, and I'm going to call for assistance. So how can you do that? Knowing that ahead of time. In our church, we have a security closet. On the security closet, we have a sign that lists what the church address is, what the non-emergency phone number is for calling the dispatch center, which handles police and fire and medical, and then of course 911. So, so we're talking about that ahead of time. We're planning for it, and you'd be surprised how many people, when it comes time to it, make a phone call, how many people may not remember what the church address is. So have that stuff available to people. And if possible, so we talk about calling police, non-emergency line or 911, and calling 911, being prepared for those kind of things. So, and if you can, remove yourself. Avoid the situation if possible. Avoid getting into it. Or once you're into it, can you remove yourself? Can you avoid it by getting out of that situation? Work out who you'll ask for help from your communication, with people ahead of time. One incident that we had at our church, I asked somebody else. I asked one of the ushers, can you call the non-emergency line and ask them to have a police officer swing by? And then I continued to deal with the person as they kind of watched me and made a phone call just as my safety backup that day. So, who are you going to help? Who are you going to call for help? Who are you going to get to assist you at the church talk to them a little bit ahead of time. That is very important in this use of force, limiting your liabilities, and and what your responsibilities are, because your responsibilities are not to cause an issue of liability for the church or for yourself. We don't want you to get hurt. Nobody wants you to get hurt, and we don't want liabilities for the church. And by the way, you getting hurt could end up being a liability for the church. So we don't want that from many respects. And next we have action. We take action. And what's that action gonna be? What does it need to be? What's the minimum action that I can do to deal with the situation? So, and again, don't forget, is that walking away from this for now? Is walking away the best action? Calling somebody else. So when possible, dealing with something should begin with our verbal skills. De-escalation. So when you're looking at what training do you need? De-escalation training. Good verbal skills communication training. Those should be some training things that you're looking into, whether you find something on the internet, something locally, whatever that looks like. Communication is very important. Communication helps you work through these situations, helps you deal with difficult people, helps you de-escalate situations. And by the way, it also begins to help you minimize your liabilities. Yes, I tried communicating with this person. Yes, our whole team took de-escalation training and verbal skills training. It begins to minimize your liabilities and help you in the responsibility of dealing with this situation in the best way. So these should be the things we begin to do as communication. And don't forget, we talked about it in assessment, starting that communication, de-escalation, verbal skills also helps you assess and evaluate. Is the person listening to you? Is the person communicating back and forth with you? If you've asked them to stop because it's scaring people or you're concerned and they're not listening to you. So verbal skills have many important aspects in this use of force concept and minimizing liability. Personal action may be necessary if removing yourself is not an option. Can I just turn around and walk away and go inside and call the police? And de-escalation, and if the de-escalation and verbal skills don't work, you also want to be looking at that. Do you have to take physical action, or can you walk away if the verbal skills are not working? What action do you have to take? If you feel like you're reaching a point that that you're in danger, that other people are in danger of being harmed, then you may be left with no other choice than to defend yourself or defend others. And what does that look like? Physically jumping in, physically striking someone to try to control the situation if they're trying to attack someone or attacking someone. What does that kind of look like? And are you prepared for that? So there's a whole nother aspect that we're not talking about in this discussion, and that is defensive tactics. Are you prepared for that? If your verbal skills aren't working and this person begins to attack you or others, how are you going to defend yourself or those other people? What are your defensive measures? And this is, whatever tools you have available. Some of you may not have any tools. So how are you going to use your hands? What are you going to grab to help defend yourself? Those kind of things, much less maybe if you do carry some tools, then you're better prepared for that. And perception and reasonableness of your response are important. And I want to mention that. It's just a side little note here, but here's where we begin to look at, if you do strike someone and injure them, if you do something that in your action does take someone's life or injure them greatly as you're trying to defend yourself or others, then here's where later on people begin to look at your reasonableness. Police all the time are criticized for, was it reasonable, the force that they use? And what's the perception? And what did they actually do? What's the reasonableness? And that, we want to err on the side. For those purposes, I propose to you my opinion, and that's what I'm giving you today as opinions, not legal advice. And so my opinions is that you want to err on the side of being cautious. So you want to have lots of verbal skills training and de-escalation training, and you want to have certificates and have that documented, that you've been through that training and that your team's been through that training, whatever that looks like. You want to talk about that when you write a report about this or you tell others about it. You want to talk about how you tried to de-escalate and have verbal communication with this person, and you tried and tried and tried, and they just refused to listen to you until the attack happens. You took a second person with you. You thought about, can I just wait and call the police? But in this circumstance, your members of your church were starting to go in or out of the church, whatever that looks like. So your reasonableness in this situation, not just walking up to somebody and smacking them, but your reasonableness in this situation does become important later on, as I see it, as I give you my opinion about it. And then we get to deadly force. And again, that can be those of you that carry firearms, that could be those of you that carry but it wouldn't work, or you couldn't use it, you grab something else. Those of you that don't carry firearms, you could still pick up a stick or something in your auditorium and use that to strike someone and cause deadly force or escalate into that deadly physical force. So, and I want to mention, again, we're asking sometimes, maybe as we talked about in the first part of this, we're asking, when can we use force, or when can we use deadly physical force? But it has long-lasting effects, and we kind of talked about that on you, but certainly on the subject that you're employing the physical force on, beginning to use that physical force on, and then don't forget those who witness it and see it. It can be long-lasting effects. We don't want to avoid it for that reason. We want to protect people. We want to protect ourselves. And I don't want you to hesitate because of that, but I do want us to be cautious and not have the attitude of when can I use it, but more of, and I hope you see that fine line, more of when do I have to use it, so that I'm trying everything else that I can, given the time that I have, which may only be seconds. I'm doing what else I can if I have the time to avoid having to use that force. So, it can be mentally, emotionally, and financially devastating to you, your church, other people involved in this situation. So we want to be cautious, and we want to be training our brain in this. If this happens, what should I do? If that happens, what should I do? Very important stuff. Don't forget the question, at what point do I have no other options other than to use deadly force? And these are the kind of things we've got to work on our brain a little bit ahead of time. If you're not practicing this ahead of time, I'm afraid your brain is not exercised in this area. You don't have the answers. And so we need to practice ahead of time, because these decisions sometimes have to be made in a split second or seconds. And so we want all this preparation up to an assessment and all of those kind of things. We're practicing that, but we're also practicing the use of force concept, or this deadly force concept as well. We're talking about it, exercising our brain, asking leaders questions, training in the area, and scenarios become very valuable in this situation. So we want to be exercising our brain, and it doesn't have to be a formal scenario. Just some things you talk about. Exercise your own mind if you're your only member of your security team, or get together with other team members and have some discussion, collaborate a little bit and have some discussion on what should we do or what could we do, and maybe bring in a law enforcement person to have some discussion with you and your team, kind of thing. So again, unarmed, if you're unarmed, this can mean deadly strikes to the head, using a pole, or, some of you might even be able to cause deadly strikes with your hand. And so that is certainly possible as well. So, and armed security means that you could possibly be using your firearm in this situation. So we want to practice those scenarios. We want to be thinking of this kind of stuff. And it's very, very important, as I see it, that we're exercising our minds. So what options do you have at various levels? We want to be talking about that. What options do you have given the variables with different scenarios? What do they have? What are they doing? What are your options to deal with that? Back off and call the police. Bring a couple people with you. Keep distance so that you're safe. All of those kind of things. So we're back to, discussing some of those basics. Preparation is important. Learning those new skills, as we mentioned earlier in the first segment of use of force. learn new skills. And I hopefully after this discussion, you see it even more important to learn communication skills, learn defensive tactics wherever you can. I'm not saying you have to be some black belt in karate or have to go to some special communication school. Just whatever you can find. Find people that you can trust on the internet to do great training. Find somebody local in your community to give you some training. But do something to help improve your skills or give you new skills, especially in these areas that are so important. And communication, de-escalation, defusing is a very important area for us to limit our liabilities and in dealing with force, so that use of force, because then we can show that we were responsible and that we were prepared. And practice whatever current skills you have, whatever tools you have. If you have a firearm, if you don't, whatever your skills are, practice those. And again, as we mentioned, study what else is happening at other churches across our nation, at other churches in your communities. What's going on? And how does your legal folks deal with that? Those kind of things. Pay attention to security, crime issues, trends in these areas in your region. What is going on? And it doesn't have to be exactly with the church. It can be a citizen who defended themselves. And how did they do it? And they were on a street corner, or they were in a store or a restaurant, and they defended themselves, used some sort of force. And how did that go for them? How did it work immediately? And then what were the long-term effects? What was brought up? Because you may hear some things like, this person had no training in this area, or this person didn't try to even communicate or warn the person, and so learn those things, and then that becomes a topic for you to begin to practice for your mind and for your team. And certainly get questions answered wherever you can. Ask someone, send me a note, and I'll give you my opinions. Or contact somebody in your community. There's lots of great law enforcement folks, lots of great fire folks, medical folks, EMTs that can give you opinions in different areas that are important here, whether it's use of force, whether it's safety, security, whether it's medical emergencies. Seek those people out and get some great opinions from those folks, because there's lots of great people, great professionals out there in your community that can help you with those situations. And in conclusion, prepare yourself for the avoidance of problems, as we talked about in the first section. Don't act alone. Wherever you can, don't act alone, because that brings a whole set of circumstances. When you're by yourself, people can perceive they can take advantage of one person, take advantage of you. So have a second or a third person if you can. And especially if it's dark, you're going out in the corner of the parking lot, or it's a big person, seem to be acting suspiciously or like they have mental health issues, please take a second person with you. Don't act alone. And practice this awareness, this situational awareness, and visualize what to do. If you have a person out in the parking lot and it's at the end of services, people are going to be dismissed in 5 minutes, what are you going to do? Who are you going to get to go with you? And then go talk to that person, and then explore, what are you going to do? Do I have flashlights in the closet that are working? Go check them. Make sure they work. Do I have a vest to put on, a safety vest, so I don't get run over? There's all kinds of things that we can look at in dealing with these things. But it comes back to visualizing, what are you going to do? What are the possibilities? What are you going to do? And don't act alone. Who are you going to take with you? And practice that intuition, those instincts to avoid danger. What do you feel by this situation? Too dangerous? Okay, I better get a second person. I better wait to call the police. Practice that stuff. Discuss it in your mind. What if this? You have a person in the parking lot and they seem to be just dressed differently. I don't see anything suspicious. Am I going to go out and talk to them? And what are you going to do when you do that? You're going to maintain your distance. You're going to use good communication skills while you're still a distance away, and evaluate if they're listening to you, if they're getting upset, and how are you going to change that? Literally, you might just walk back into the church and call the police. Practice those things. Otherwise, your mind will not have that material should you get involved in one of those types of situations. So study and practice with what action options you have. What abilities do you have? Who do you have to assist you? What communication skills do you have? What do you need to get? As well as going into what other tools do you have? And that's all kinds of things. It's other people. When you talk about action options, action can be communication, can be tools, can be instruments that you might use, including your flashlight or a firearm or those kind of things, or whatever else that might be. So think about what options you have in different scenarios, and especially if you hear about something that happens to another church or another ministry or to a business in your community. What did they do? What could you do in that situation? Challenge your mind, challenge your team. Those kind of things are what is very important to you being successful, being responsible in these situations, handling things better. And the important thing is helping to minimize or limit the liability for your church and for yourself as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. However you get this information, whether it's a podcast or a vlog, via YouTube or wherever it is. And I mentioned, send me a note if you have nobody else to confer with, and I'm not putting it at that level. Anytime you want to send me a note, I'd love to hear from you. You can send it to captainjoepuckett@gmail.com. That goes direct to me. Don't forget, we have information for you all day, every day at the churchsecurityanswerman.com. And we're always wanting to hear from you. Post a comment if you're listening or watching this somewhere where you can. We watch for those things. We want to have that interaction, and we certainly want to be providing valuable content to you that can help you from our perspective and that helps you from what your needs are currently, that we're keeping up with the modern day issues that we face. So thanks again for watching or for listening, wherever it is, and I hope you have a safe and secure week.